to episode 127 of Late Night Linux, recorded on the 24th of May, 2021. I'm Joe, and with me are Phelim.
G'day.
Graham.
Bonsoir.
And Will.
Hello.
No attempt was made. So we've got a packed show, we should get straight on with it. Up first impressions. So a couple of weeks ago, we pressed the random distribution button on DistroWatch, and it gave us NixOS, which is a distro with an unusual approach to package management, let's say. We got quite a lot of pre-feedback about this. Andrew wrote to us and said, if you find that you like NixOS or its package manager, you might also like to try installing Nix on your normal distro. You could also take a look at Geeks. This is a sort of clone of NixOS, an OS and package manager except all free software, although you can install non-free software if you wish. And rather than using a config language like Nix does, it uses a fully fledged programming language called Guile, which is Scheme, a Lisp dialect, for configuration. Geeks lets you programmatically configure an entire system, build images from those config files, distribute distro-agnostic packs of software, install specific software versions, and isolate them in your own environment. Or you can just ignore all that and use it as a bog-standard package manager. Check it out. It's nuts.
I agree with the last, 1.5 words, whatever.
Yeah. So this is an unusual distro. There's no two ways about it. Because it's not really a distro. The NixOS itself is more of a sort of technical demonstration of the package manager. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I think so. They certainly take every opportunity to push the package manager and it being available separately on other distributions.
Yeah, and I did try that briefly on Ubuntu and it worked fine, pretty much. So there was a GNOME version and a Plasma version, or like a minimal one. I went for Plasma and booted it up, and it was like, oh, right, a nice Plasma desktop. And I had 3 icons on the desktop, and they were Terminal, gparted, and Manual. I saw those 3, I thought, oh no, there's not going to be an easy installer here if they have the Manual on the desktop. And I was right. It's not just a next style installer. It's not even a horrendous one like Fedora. Don't at me. I installed that on a tablet recently. It was a nightmare. But it's not got a graphical installer. And I was just like, oh no, this is going to be as bad as Arch, isn't it? But it wasn't. It's pretty straightforward if you know what you're doing. I think you would have had some experience with Linux before to get this installed, though.
I chose the GNOME one because it said it was recommended and, also GNOME. The first thing that struck me, though, was that the graphical image, the download, was only 1.4 gig. Now, after Endless last week or the week before, that was quite a shock. But yeah, it was nice and compact. I had a few problems getting it to boot, though, because I didn't think the ISO was signed. So I had to turn off secure boot in order to get the thing to actually start up. But when I did get it to boot up, it did boot into the UI on the haunted laptop. So great success, which is something that neither Ubuntu nor Enders could manage. So yeah, off to a good start. But then, like you say, how do I actually get this thing to install? The GNOME version boots to a desktop on which there is nothing. No terminal, no parted, no nothing, because of the design decisions the GNOME team have incorrectly made. But I got a terminal up, but I did find that things like the shortcut that Ubuntu have put in there for terminal, Control-Alt-T, wasn't bound to the terminal. So, what's going on? So it took me a little while to get around that. And I also fell into a trap with having to disable secure boot. I also figured that I had to install it in BIOS mode rather than EFI mode. And I got stuck in a bit of a loop there trying to work out exactly what I was supposed to be doing. But finally, got it to boot, secure boot off, EFI on, all the partitions created, followed the instructions, logged in as root, but there we go, and then wanted to install Firefox. And it's at this point that I gave up.
So it's funny that you installed the EFI one. I also installed the EFI one to a KVM virtual image, which ran CBIOS. So I had to redo the entire thing again as well because it wouldn't boot after that. And I also don't know my own locale names properly because I thought I'd put in IE. That didn't work, and it kept bombing out of the installer loads of times. It was IE_EN. No, none of these things worked. So I gave up and I picked US English, and then I couldn't find the bloody @ key, the hash key, or any of these things. And but I mean, looking at the config file, it is kind of cool from a sysadmin point where you could push a lot of these out through a Pixie boot system or whatever and get exactly what you want. I liked the fact that I could partition the disk properly in the installer, because I don't overly like the way any of the other distros do this, because I don't feel like you get enough control where, you know, you might want to put ZFS in your home directory, but not on this part, but you want to put that as a RAID partition, whatever. And it looks like you could do all of those things and then pre-configure it quite nicely in a, you know, it's not a horrible config file format. I don't know what it actually is, but it's not terrible.
Yeah, and if you're following the instructions, you basically have to mount the disk that you want to install it on, and then you can generate a config file with one command, and then you go in and edit that config file. And that's where the power of this distro and package manager comes from. You have ultimate control over it. That doesn't necessarily appeal to me, but I can see how it would appeal to some people.
Yeah, they talk about that power and that reliability on their website as your desktop being your continuous integration environment. If you know that you have configured your machine in a particular way to install a particular version of a particular package, then you can just copy that config off into your CI environment, and you can be 100% guaranteed that you're going to get exactly the same environment in your build system as you do on your desktop. I think that's a really nice idea for people who are deploying CI to the cloud every day, just to know that they can develop their software, test their software, and push it out, and it will work.
Yeah, I didn't expect NixOS to be so different in that way. I went for the very minimal download, thinking that I would build up an installation from scratch, but really I got to the command line, which actually is functional. It's probably the same on both of your installations. You've got network and you can do other things with it, so it's quite an interesting way to play around with it. But I started reading the documentation, which actually is excellent. The documentation is really well written, and it does remind me a lot of Arch. I think it's a great way of really understanding your system and understanding how Linux comes together. And like you said, I love the fact that everything was from a simple, easily parsed single configuration file for all these different aspects. And they must have, they come up with a package manager. They think, well, what's the ultimate thing you can do with a package manager? It's put together the kernel, the system packages, the configuration files. All of that is described, in an easily parsable file. And so it's really different to what I'm used to, but also really interesting. I think if I'd had more time, I could see myself getting quite into this.
Yeah, I think that is the big problem here, that the idea of this segment is to spend about an hour with it and just get some first impressions. That's why it's called that. But this is not a distro and package management system that lends itself to a quick look. It's something you really need to dig into and realize the power that you have with it. For example, I installed the Plasma version, and in the documentation there was something about XFCE. I was like, oh, right, yes. And it was literally editing a couple of lines of that config file, running one command, reboot, suddenly XFCE. Sweet. And it's that power that it gives you that is very attractive to some people, but ain't nobody got time for that, unfortunately. When I can just download something like Ubuntu, or if I'm feeling a bit more adventurous, EndeavourOS, that is, a pre-configured XFCE desktop. But for people who want it just their way, I could see this having real appeal to them. And that's why when we said we were going to do this, we got so many people writing to us saying, oh, I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about it.
I handle all my configuration files through a private Git repo, which I find really handy for keeping track of changes when something's broken. But that's really just for, user accessible files. It's quite so everything's atomic in this. And if you put, you can see all the changes to the configuration file and easily see what's changed or roll back or roll forward. And that's really interesting from an entire operating system point of view. It would be nice if, I don't know whether there is something that's more like, like Manjaro came for Arch. Something which is an easy place for most people to jump off and start using the distro like they normally do, but can take advantage of some of the unique aspects of NixOS.
Right, so I think the takeaway is that we appreciate it for what it is, but it's probably not the best for us at this time in our lives. So let's go to DistroWatch then and press the random distribution button. And what have we got? Rocky Linux. Now this is new. This is essentially CentOS, but there is a desktop version of it. So, I mean, it's been a long time since I looked at CentOS, and I suppose this is it's fairly new. Maybe we can give this a go and see what we think of it. Okay, this episode is sponsored by Linode. Go to linode.com/late-night-linux to get started with $100 free credit and 60 days to use it. Linode offers cloud computing solutions in data centers all over the world. Whether it's scalable VMs with a choice of major distros or one-click apps and stacks, dedicated CPU and high RAM instances, block and object storage, or cloud firewalls and DDoS protection, Linode has everything you need for your personal projects right up to managed enterprise infrastructure. I recently moved our website over to Linode and it was really straightforward. And when I needed a Mumble server for our community meetups, spinning up a new VM for that was an absolute breeze. Everything's been running flawlessly since I set it up, and I love the peace of mind I get from the automatic backups. So go to linode.com/late-night-linux, get your $100 credit, and check out Linode's great cloud hosting services and first-class, always available support. That's linode.com/late-night-linux. On to a bit of admin then. And first of all, thank you everyone who supports us with PayPal and Patreon. We really do appreciate that. If you want to join those people, latenightlinux.com/support. And remember, for $5 or more per month on Patreon, you can get an advert-free RSS feed. And just a quick reminder that the next Mumble get-together will be on Friday, the 4th of June at 10 p.m. UK time. Details at latenightlinux.com/mumble. And if you want to get in contact, latenightlinux.com/contact. Okay, this episode is sponsored by CBT Nuggets, training for IT professionals or anyone looking to build IT skills. Go to cbtnuggets.com/late-night-linux and sign up for a 7-day free trial. I've just started my learning journey with CBT Nuggets, but I've already picked up tons of knowledge from the short and manageable videos in the Docker and Network Fundamentals courses. Their in-house trainers are active and certified IT professionals who add around 40 hours of new training to the course catalogue each week, so you can always stay current and up to date. So start your free 7-day trial today at cbtnuggets.com/late-night-linux. It includes unlimited access to all course materials, including virtual labs. That's cbtnuggets.com/late-night-linux. Let's do some feedback then. And bad news for A&M, almost every single person that got in touch with us about this said the artwork is fine, keep it as it is.
You're all fucking losers.
Well, Peter specifically said, the chat about the logo made me laugh as the Late Night Linux logo is a work of art compared to the 2.5 admins one.
Did you do that yourself, Joe?
Yes. That is genius. What I did was, I did a sudo apt-get update, screenshotted the terminal, blurred it a bit, and then got a font and wrote that on there. It took me an hour to do that, and it's great.
At least it's got two completely different colours in it, as opposed to two different shades of the same fucking colour, which is no colour at all, black and grey.
Well, whatever. An anonymous person, I think it looked that way from the email, but anyway, it said, your logo is the XFCE of logos. So
I rest my case, two fucking colours.
Oh, I rest my case. Therefore, it is awesome and the best logo.
Outdated.
Whatever. Nigel said, I can suggest some alternative Linux audio editors that generally pass below the radar should Audacity become unacceptable or unavailable following its takeover by MuseScore. With the exception of Ocean Audio, they don't seem to get any maintenance anymore, but I've been using them off and on for years without any problems. They work fine. And he sent us a bloody great big list. Sweep, Ocean Audio, MH Wave Edit, Audio Recorder, and GNOME Wave Cleaner. And I had no idea there were so many ways to do audio stuff on Linux, because obviously you think of Audacity and then a proper digital audio workstation would be Ardor. But there seem to be actually quite a few in between. Graham, have you heard of any of these?
I have actually, yeah, because there used to be a part of the magazine that was roundup of apps. And every 3 or 4 years, we'd do a roundup of audio apps. So I think the last time I did it, in fact, Sweep won. I really like Sweep. But yeah, the problem is that they're not being developed. And I think, as Nigel mentions, Sweep does get the LADSPAR parallel effects right. And it's got a lovely UI. The rest of them, I'm not sure. I mean, yes, if Audacity goes down the drain, then it's great that we can still do some simple audio editing. But I like Sweep, and Ocean Audio is probably second best in that list.
Yeah, that's the one I'd heard of, Ocean Audio. An audio recorder I had heard of, but I think that's not in the Ubuntu repos. You have to add a PPA or something for that. So that's not attractive to me. But yeah, thank you, Nigel, for all those tips, and I'll put links to all of those in the show notes for anyone who wants to check them out.
Don't forget K-Wave.
Oh yeah, K-Wave.
Well, stick it in the notes and I might link to it if you're lucky.
It could be good K-Wave. It's just not changed since 2002.
Oh, right. That sounds good. I should check it out.
Have you seen the screenshots for Sweep?
Wow, that looks good, man. That looks like Amiga style. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I might have to change to that. That's it. You're all installing Sweep from now on. All right, Richard said, I tried NixOS myself this week to play along with you guys exploring distros. You said you had an issue with the image needing the whole disk. I dropped the Endless ISO onto my 128 gig USB drive that I have Ventoy installed on, so I can easily boot from a bunch of random ISOs and not bother deleting them too often, and it worked fine from there as a live image. Thought I'd plug Ventoy to you just in case you are unfamiliar, as it might make the distro exploration process a little easier. Now, Ventoy is something that I hear a lot of people talking about and I've not tried out. Have any of you lot tried this out?
Never.
What I'm tempted to do is get one of those enclosures that you can put an M.2 drive in, maybe even an NVMe drive. And, you know, if you had a 120 gig one of them, you could put loads of ISOs on that and get, you know, super fast speeds. So I should do it, but I've got a couple of fast USB drives, so I can't really justify the expense, to be honest.
Do they do some sort of magic to make the ISO work properly? Because I tried this using Grub's boot from ISO command that you can do, and I just had Grub installed and fed it a load of paths, but it never did any of the commands properly with the magic of whatever the CDs used to get working properly.
I've not tried it, so I couldn't tell you firsthand, but from what I've heard, then yes, it does deal with all of that for you.
Nice one.
You just stick it onto the USB drive and then just sling your ISOs on there and boot from any of them. And the thing about Endless is you can have persistence with that, which we didn't actually mention when we talked about it. So you don't have to install it. You could run it from a fast USB drive with persistence.
Yeah, very, very handy for going to a customer site where you have to bring, you know, like the last 4 versions of Ubuntu Server and maybe Red Hat, CentOS or something like that as well. And then have one single stick rather than my bag of ropey USB sticks. It'd be great.
All the free ones you got at conferences.
Yeah, write once, never read again.
Yeah. Okay. This episode is sponsored by Datadog, the monitoring and analytics platform for comprehensive visibility into your Linux environment. By uniting metrics and events from servers, databases, applications, and more, Datadog can easily give you a unified view into your entire infrastructure. Easily identify hidden sources of latency, like overloaded hosts, by monitoring server metrics alongside application data. With machine learning-based alerts and features like anomaly detection, Datadog can also help you to monitor and alert on the health of your servers in real time without alert fatigue. Start your Datadog trial today by visiting datadog.com/late-night-Linux. Start your free trial, create one dashboard, and you'll get a free Datadog t-shirt. That's datadog.com/late-night-Linux. Let's talk about the Pinephone then. Now, I ended up with 2 Pinephones when the Braveheart edition came out, because I bought one and then it never arrived, and then I was given one by Pine, and so that was the one I used, and I just never even opened the box for the second one. And I was supposed to give it to you, Phelim, but then sending internationally was tricky.
I'm still better
with the battery. It turned out that we could have just taken the battery out and sent it to you, and you could have bought a battery separately because it's just a basic Samsung battery fits it. But we didn't work that one out in time. So the long and the short of it is, Graham, you have now got this phone. You've had it for a few weeks. What do you think of it?
I've got a real geeky interest in phones that might or might not run Linux. I had a Trolltech green phone, and I had a variety of Ubuntu phones as well. And so the first thing, the quality, the actual manufacturing and engineering quality of it, I'm impressed considering what it is. It's got a decent size. It's got a decent display. It's not too heavy. It's about as heavy as my LG G6 with a screen smashed in about 10 different places. And it's really refreshing to be able to do what you want with a phone. So the first thing I did actually was I put, I think it's post-market OS with the Phosh UI, which I think is like GNOME designed for mobile, a bit like how Plasma Mobile is Plasma Desktop for mobile.
Yeah, well, that came from Purism, didn't it? Pure OS.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, I had to. But I did this by. So when you sent it over, it basically just had a very basic boot menu. But they've come up with a system of, it's called Jump Drive. You basically, so there's an SD card reader and there's an eMMC device storage internally. Stick the Jump Drive onto the SD card and put it in the phone, and it becomes USB external storage, standard external storage, and you can use DD or any imaging tool on your Linux desktop to write an actual raw image to either the SD card itself or to the eMMC storage. So I did that to write Phosh to it. So that was my first UI kind of operating system experience. And that's where kind of your excitement and everything gets a dose of reality when you realize how far we've got to go.
Yeah, because this is not the most powerful device in the world, and this software is not the most mature in the world. And it is a bit of a reality check. Although, because I knew we were going to be talking about this, I dug out my Pinephone and installed a couple of different OSs on the SD card and booted them up. And Manjaro Plasma, I put on an SD card, and I was so impressed with it that I then installed it on the internal eMMC. So I was actually really pleased with how it's progressed, because it's been several months since I dug it out and had a look at it. Did you get a chance to look at Manjaro?
Yeah, I did. I tried two Plasma Mobile ones in the end. I tried the Manjaro one, and I also tried the post-market OS version. And there's actually a big difference in performance between the two of them, which leads me to think that a lot could be done, because the main issue, maybe because I use Plasma as my desktop, is that the response time on everything, you can see there's no optimization in the GPU, and lots of transitions take a long time to react to your input. Rotating the screen, for example, takes seconds. And I often find it takes seconds to unlock the phone. But having said that, seeing this is the first time I've used Plasma on a mobile device, and seeing something that you're so familiar with on a Linux desktop, the widgets, for example, the icons, the app names, although I've got a problem with the app names for people who might be coming to the phone not knowing that it's running Plasma Desktop.
Yeah. It's
really quite exciting, and it's remarkable how well Plasma works and how good it looks. I mean, the theming, for example, you've got the same flexibility as you have on Plasma Desktop to change all the colors and the palettes and the effects, and there's a dark mode and there's a light mode. I've got a bit of a dark mode fetish. I like my phones to have a dark mode, and Plasma was definitely the best one for that. This is what I just can't see how we're going to get enough effort behind these kind of initiatives to be able to create the performance that we need outside of this being a relatively low spec 2 or 3 gig phone. It just still needs a lot of work around everything, basically, just to make it smooth.
But you look at Ubuntu Touch on the Pinephone. Did you have a chance to do that?
Yeah, I did. So that was the final one I installed, and I haven't used Ubuntu Phone since my Meizu MX5 gave up the ghost. And so that was really pleasant and really pleasing to see, firstly, that UBports is still developing the old idea, seeing what Unity has become, even though it's now called, is it Lomiri?
Lomiri or something, yeah.
It all makes a lot of sense. It's basically, I've played on some recent macOS devices, and Apple's become obsessed with panels sliding in from the left and the right and the bottom. And that basically is what we had on Unity on the Ubuntu phone. And It's been really well executed on UB ports. And I also noticed, despite the fact that it's missing some features, the performance on UB ports was better than any of the other distros I tried on the phone. So those transitions were really quick. Entering the pin was really quick. Rotating the phone was really quick and smooth. There's a few quirks that are odd. You swipe down from the top to get to the settings pane, but the settings pane is only like 5 pixels high until you click on the calendar, for example, and that takes up a bit more space. And then you can swipe between them, but it's not how you're used to, like the Android full screen full of options that you can easily access to easily change the brightness, for example.
It's funny that you were impressed with the performance of Ubuntu Touch. I wasn't really, because I've also got a OnePlus One, which is a beast of a phone. It might be old, but that is a great phone, and I'm so pissed off with myself that I snapped the antenna off when I tried to change the battery. So Wi-Fi and Bluetooth just basically don't work. You can use Wi-Fi within about 6 feet of the router, but otherwise it just basically doesn't work. But otherwise, the performance on that is night and day compared to the Pinephone, especially off the SD card. Maybe it'd be different off the eMMC, whatever. But the Pinephone seems slow to me compared to the OnePlus One.
I'm comparing it to Plasma on the Manjaro and on Postmarket OS. I mean, I've got it in my hand now, and I would stand by it. It's I turn it on, the screen comes on instantly. You can swipe in from the right to see those launch icons, swiping up to enter the lock mode. It's really quick, much quicker than Plasma was running on this device. I wish I'd done some tests so I could be kind of quantitative about it.
That's so weird. I had the complete opposite experience. And I don't know why. I found that Plasma, it wasn't the smoothest, but I was so impressed with Manjaro Plasma that I installed it on the phone properly. And the fact that it's Manjaro, you get updates all the time.
Yeah.
The graphical updates work. Pacman SYU works. And I'm just really impressed with how Manjaro runs on it.
Well, also, I think you can't really use UB ports. There are some bits missing, like the accounts bit doesn't work. The apps are the apps are all web apps, which I'm not terribly happy with. The brightness slider doesn't work. So there are things that it's not quite there yet. So I'd still probably go back to Plasma. And I really hope that Plasma improves performance, or maybe if we see it on a more powerful phone in the future. It's quite exciting.
How did you find the apps? Did you think that what you use your phone for is usable with what selection you get with either UB ports or Plasma?
Honestly, it's going to take a kind of an Armageddon to fully make the switch to a device like this. If Google gets incredibly zealous and pushes me over a tipping point, then yes, I can see the apps being... Often they're the same apps. I mean, with Manjaro, you can install anything. And in fact, there was a point where I installed Telegram and mistakenly installed the desktop version of Telegram, had a mouse pointer on the screen and had to, drag it around to be able to get it out of the way.
I love it.
So if you've got a reason to, then yes, I think the apps are enough. But for most people outside of us, they're going to find it very, very difficult.
Oh, never mind about those unimportant people. I mean, I like the idea that it could be like I was really hopeful that the Firefox phone would be a very useful device. There'd be enough that I would need on it, but it was such a disaster. And I even bought 2 of them, so, shame on me. But I like the way that you've both described and how you update these phones, the fact that they're actually getting proper updates, and the fact that you don't have this horrible mystical black box that gets installed via the manufacturer that you have to trust that this ROM image that you've got for the firmware and kernel and stuff is going to be legit. It's just like a Linux distro. I really like the sound of that. And, maybe we shouldn't optimize too early. Maybe we should actually just work on the phone, on the apps that we need. And then, the next generation comes along. It would be a shame that they spend too long optimizing for it. And then, Pinephone 2 comes out or whatever.
Yeah, I don't really understand where the optimization would need to be done, whether it's at the driver level or whether it's at the Plasma level.
Yeah.
It feels to me like the best experience. I do generally have positive things to say about Ubuntu Touch, UB ports, whatever you want to call it, on proper hardware. As I say proper hardware, properly powerful hardware, not low-end hardware like this. Because, for your what are you looking at? About 150-ish quid, maybe 200 quid, something like that for a Pinephone. And I was thinking about this, like, what could you get for that kind of price? New, not much, but decent nick off eBay. You could get like a Pixel XL, maybe even a Pixel 2, run Lineage on it with just F-Droid. And yeah, okay, you've not got proper GNU/Linux, but you've got a relatively private phone there. And that still seems to me like the only serious, realistic option if you want to avoid iPhone and Android with Google Apps.
But the only problem there is that your kernel and your driver level is not getting updated. And, you know, that's such a low level thing that you really want it to be updated, and it's just not cared for properly at all.
I do agree with you, Joe. I mean, in comparison to running F-Droid apps on, you know, something like Lineage, which I feel much more comfortable with, I really wish there was a more effective Android open source platform. Right, well, we'd better get out of here then. Next time, we'll probably be talking about what's been going on in the news, but we'll have to see about that. Until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Phelim.
I've been Graham.
And I've been Will.
See you later.